Hey there, coffee enthusiasts. Josh here from Alternative Brewing, and today we have an exciting head-to-head comparison of AeroPress attachments with the Fellow Prismo, the AeroPress Flow Control Filter Cap, and the Joepresso Espresso Attachment. Now, we've already covered off of a Fellow Prismo versus Joepresso in a separate video that you can find up here, where the Joepresso did come out on top with its impressive coffee quality, but now, with the AeroPress Flow Control Filter Cap most recently released, we can compare all three. Now, it isn't lost on many of you that the Flow Control Filter Cap from AeroPress is quite similar to the Fellow Prismo, and it does yield similar results. And that should honestly speak for itself. And the Joepresso, they've recently launched a version 2 of their product, and this appears to have improved on the original design. So we'll see where that takes us. Now, before we dive into this exciting comparison, I do have a small favor to ask you. If there is a moment in this video while you're watching it that you're like, yeah, Josh, that's right, where there might be a small nugget of inspo or enjoyment that comes to you, go ahead and smash that like button or drop a comment below or even hit that subscribe button, because trust me, it's what our channel needs to keep brewing awesome content for you. Fair enough? Let's jump right into the showdown. Today, we'll be summarizing our findings and evaluating the pros and cons of each attachment, focusing on the espresso-like quality coffee that they produce. And let's for a moment allow the elephant to speak regarding the phrase espresso-like coffee, because I get rolled every time I mention this word. But I've got nothing else to refer to when we're brewing this coffee. Like, what do I call the coffee? Because you're right, it ain't actual espresso. There, I said it, it's not actual espresso, but it isn't straight filter coffee either. You get what I'm saying? Like, it's not manual espresso, but it's not just plain filter coffee, it's brewed coffee. You get where I'm going here. So if you do have a better word that I can use, help me out here, throw it in the comment section down below. Let's start with the Fellow Prismo. This consists of two components. You have the stainless steel fine mesh filter, and it has a nice thick seal around the outside, and this is placed inside the Prismo attachment, and in the middle of the Prismo attachment is a silicone one-way valve, and this design allows for a small increase of pressure in the AeroPress and directs your brew through a single hole at the bottom of the attachment. Now, with the filter placed inside the attachment, always the Fellow facing upwards, attaching it onto the bottom of the AeroPress, you kind of have to like push in against the seal to give it a twist, and it's a really nice tight seal. And even still, I wouldn't probably try and lock it on all the way. It's always really good. Now, similarly, the AeroPress also has that single one-way silicone valve at the bottom, and this assists also in making sure that there is no dripping from the filter during that bloom and steeping phase of brewing your AeroPress. You can also see where AeroPress have gone separate ways in the design of the interior of the cap, where they've chosen raised channels. I believe for better brewing without the need of a steel filter, where you can just place a paper filter straight on top and brew your coffee that way in the AeroPress. Or you can also just use a steel filter inside the Flow Control Cap, whereas I've never actually used the Prismo with just a paper filter inside. And the main reason for that is, when doing so and attaching that onto the bottom of the AeroPress, it's quite loose to begin with. So I always just used it with its included parts, where, as I've mentioned, it's quite a nice tight fit. But when it comes to the Flow Control Filter Cap, whether you're using paper or steel or a combination, it's quite a nice fit without any seal. Yeah, that's good. All right. Let's now check out the Joepresso. Now, the Joepresso is a separate cap with a pressurized filter basket that sits inside of this, and that has a capacity of around 18 to 20 grams. And from the version 1 to the version 2, honestly, not much has changed other than the improved workflow, where the version 1 had a separate silicone seal and this kind of clunky dispersion screen that sat on top of your coffee, whereas the version 2 has gone similar to the Prismo, where it's an all-in-one metal screen with your silicone seal around that. So it is the workflow more than anything that's improved with this newer setup. And the seal for the Joepresso, with your coffee inside and the silicone seal on top of here, placing it onto the bottom of the AeroPress. Similar to the Fellow Prismo, it's a nice tight seal pushing up against that silicone seal inside the basket. So the Prismo and the AeroPress cap, these require a medium to medium fine grind, but be cautious not to go too fine, as this may result in coffee grounds in your cup, where you can add a paper filter. It might mitigate this issue, or you might just completely block the filter and you won't be able to push your brew all the way through. On the other hand, the Joepresso, this demands a finer grind than that again, similar to a mocha pot, but not as fine as espresso. And it also benefits from a gentle tamping to enhance the extraction. As you see, this is a pressurized filter basket and it's set at a constant pressure for your brew, where you can go a little fine, but you can also go too fine and it might get blocked. The ultimate test, of course, though, is taste. And while none of these attachments truly replicate an espresso shot, they do come close in their own ways. So let me set up a brew of each of these and we'll see how they can compare. All right, I couldn't help myself but be interested in wanting to brew 3 AeroPresses at the same time, because I don't think it would be any beneficial if I was brewing one, then tasting that, brewing another and tasting that with like minutes in between each brew. I really wanted to taste them all side by side, made at the same time. So that's what we're going to aim to do today. I've never done that before, but I feel like I've seen it somewhere. Now, for the reference, we're going to be using 18 grams across all of the attachments. It's all the same grind, which is around a medium to medium fine grind, which works well for all of them. And then we're going to be pouring in 65 grams of water at boiling, stir each, and then sit them all for a minute, and then press them. Again, all at the same time. It wouldn't make any sense if I was pressing them at different times. And to achieve that, well, I've brought in a very special piece of specialty coffee brewing equipment. It's all the rage, lots of people talk about it. It's a piece of wood. Yep, just about so long, maybe a foot or two long, and that's gonna help me pour and press today. Now, you can pick any one of these up at your local hardware store. I even found this one in my backyard. So anyone can do this, but I probably wouldn't recommend you doing this at home. Let's get along with it. Now, I've also used a metal filter with the AeroPress Flow Control Filter Cap, so it's metal filters across all of the 3 AeroPresses as well, which works just perfect. Pretty close. Well, pretty close to pouring them all at the same time. I'm just gonna drop you all down there. Keep my piece of wood handy. Now you can't stir the Joepresso because you've got a metal filter right over the top of it. So it's kind of stuck within that, underneath the metal filter and within the filter basket, whereas you can stir these, which is kind of good because it also then increases the extraction if you give it a nice stir. Start the clock. We're gonna sit them all here for 1 minute. All right, coming up to the minute. Geez, a minute goes quickly when you're in a rush trying to make 3 AeroPresses. I can already hear AeroPress and the Prismo kind of gave way under the heat of the pressure. What if I just do this? Oh my goodness, what am I doing? No, AeroPress is about to pop. That was more difficult than I thought it was going to be. But we got there. We got there. All right, slight leak in each, more so than others. Slight leak. I had those on nice and tight, so crema is completely gone now. Actually, it seems like maybe the same amount of leak between each of them, so it's not too bad. It's not too bad. No doubt that has something to do with pressing down on a block of wood. A little bit of a leak, that happens. All right, clean that up later. What do we got? Joepresso, AeroPress, Prismo. The Joepresso definitely had the most crema out of all 3. The most aromatics right now are with the Joepresso, with the AeroPress coming in second there. This is quite aromatic, whereas the Fellow Prismo, not so much. And the AeroPress I don't know if you noticed, that was the last to pop. So it probably gave the most pressure initially. Maybe that's the grind setting. It's the metal filter perhaps as well. I've usually only used the paper filter with the AeroPress cap, so that was interesting to see. I used a fine mesh filter with the AeroPress cap. The Prismo just comes with one, and this is that filter that sits on top of the coffee is more of a dispersion. It's actually the filter within the bottom of the basket that filters out all the grinds from it. Let's just now try all three. We'll start with the Prismo. I will say it is a little watery, but there is an intense flavor in it. Not a lot of body to it. Like I said, it's kind of watery, really, like there's a freshness to it, but not a lot of body, not a lot of texture, very watery. It tastes more like a filter coffee with using a high dose kind of thing. There's not a lot of texture in it. All right, let's try the AeroPress. The AeroPress filter cap, much more texture in this one. There's a lot more texture. It's very velvety and slick off the tongue. Now, I wouldn't say it's anywhere near espresso, obviously, but this has a lot more texture to it, so it's carrying a lot of flavor. Might have come down to maybe using that metal filter through this cap as opposed to just using the standard filter in the Prismo. But even just looking down at them, getting down to the bottoms of the cup, I feel like the AeroPress one just looks like a little creamier, a little bit thicker in its consistency than the Fellow Prismo, which is a little watery now. Yeah, that's interesting. But otherwise, acidity, not as bright, a little more muted, but again, heavy body, and then there's definitely some texture coming through there. So in terms of espressos, I think it's, it's presenting a little bit better of an espresso than the Prismo. Let's try the Joepresso now. Now, this was the one that had the most crema on it, but all crema has dissipated now. The AeroPress one has the most texture to it. It's very slick. The Joepresso is the most balanced overall. I feel like this has a nice texture. There's not a strong body, but there's a body to it. Certainly not as watery as the Prismo was. The Joepresso doesn't have as much texture as the AeroPress cap has when using, it was an Able steel filter, and it was the fine steel filter. So it's added a little bit of texture using the Able steel filter within the AeroPress cap, whereas the Joepresso, I would have to say, is the most balanced overall. Like, it has a whole bunch of sweetness, a whole bunch of acidity. There is some texture and some body in there, but not as much as the AeroPress cap. It is the well-rounded, my favorite overall, I guess. The Fellow Prismo, I don't know what happened in this shot. It's just a little bit more watery than I expected. I thought they were all gonna be, well, at least these two are gonna be similar. All right, a quick summary on all of these three filter caps. The Prismo, I didn't think it made a bad coffee, but I thought it was going to be at least close to the AeroPress, being the fact that they've got very similar designs. However, I've now realized that you're kind of stuck with the filter that the Fellow Prismo comes with. It's not really that interchangeable. I guess you could get inside that silicone seal, take that filter out and replace it with a different metal filter. However, as it is out of the box, it is how it comes. So that's the kind of brew that it made using that filter. Whereas the AeroPress, I used a Able fine disc metal filter. So that was the difference. I couldn't use all the same filters across there, but the one that I had was an Able metal disc, and I threw it in here, and that gave this coffee a little bit more body and a little bit more texture to the coffee itself. Looking in the bottoms of the cups as well, I would say though that it does have the most kind of grinds in the bottom of it. The Prismo a little less, and the Joepresso almost none at all. So that's probably part and due to that's what's giving it that body and texture through the cup, which wasn't unenjoyable, unless you don't like a mouthful of grinds, I guess, at the bottom of your cup. But the benefits of the AeroPress cap are certainly that you can use any filter. You're not kind of stuck into one filter, and you can use any sort of papers that you want. There are plenty of AeroPress filters out there. You can use the Able filters, you can use the 10-mile filters, Acer paper filters, which are fantastic. I'll make a video on that one day. You can use any filter in the AeroPress cap, which is a great benefit because then you can kind of chase the extraction or the filtration that you want out of your espresso-like brew from the AeroPress. The Joepresso, well, this was the most balanced and I would say just the most enjoyable. I would like a little bit more texture in the Joepresso. The texture in the AeroPress was the most enjoyable of all of them. High acidity in the Fellow Prismo, where it just tasted like a very strong filter brew. Like it had a lot of, like I'd added a lot of coffee into a filter brew. The AeroPress, good texture, good semi-balance, but there was definitely less acidity, more sweetness in the AeroPress cap with more body and texture throughout. And the Joepresso, like I said, had the most balance. There was sweetness, there was acidity, there was texture, there was body, there was a nice lingering aftertaste. Not as much body, which I would have liked, because espresso is just like intense. It's supposed to hit you. It's supposed to linger. It's supposed to, it's just supposed to be a mouthful of flavor, which it is, but it just didn't have that body and texture that I was after. But otherwise, I might just adjust my adjust my recipe a little bit differently, and you can probably find a little bit of body in that there. And certainly one of the advantages to the Joepresso is eliminating the need of paper filters and achieving high pressures really compared to the other two. And this results in definitely a more balanced and a stronger espresso, I feel, than these other two are capable of. While the Fellow Prismo and the AeroPress cap, these do share other advantages though. Like I've mentioned, the AeroPress cap has that advantage of using any filter that you can possibly achieve with an AeroPress. And both of these also, you can add extra coffee in them. With the Joepresso, you're kind of limited with how much you can get in that basket, and you can use the filter on top of this, but it doesn't quite screw in properly. So you're limited to about 18, 20 gram brew, whereas with the Fellow Prismo and the AeroPress cap, you can literally make, I guess, a double espresso, like adding 40 grams in there and adding like 100 mils of water and still brewing a very similar strength coffee with these two. And there's also that option of being able to stir these two where, like I mentioned, that filter sitting on top of the Joepresso basket, you can't stir them. However, I do feel again though that the version 1 or the version 2 of the Joepresso AeroPress filter is still even better than the AeroPress or the Prismo cap when it comes to excelling in delivering a better espresso-like experience. And for me, makes that superior choice. And whilst you are limited with that recipe with the Joepresso versus the other two, if you're looking to take the AeroPress brewing to the next level and enjoy espresso-like coffee at home or anywhere again, the Joepresso, it's a no-brainer. It's the attachment for me. So thank you for joining me today as we've explored the world of AeroPress attachments. I hope this comparison helps you in guiding you towards the perfect choice for your coffee brewing needs. Now, if you have any further questions or comments, please feel free to share them in the comments section down below. Also remember to smash that like button and subscribe to our channel for more coffee related content. This does help support our channel and to make more exciting reviews and comparisons. Also, don't forget to visit us at our website and follow us on social media for additional updates and exclusive content. We'd love to connect with you further and hear about your own experiences with any of these three attachments. Once again, thank you so much for watching until the end of this video. Keep brewing delicious coffee, and we'll see you in the next one.